Here is part 2 of my shocking UFO encounter. This is all about the aftermath. Hi, I'm Saratoga Ocean, and I help people master the law of attraction, spiritually awaken, and embark on a path of ascension. In this video, I'm going to share with you part 2 of my shocking UFO experience. And this is all about the amazing aftermath that occurred afterwards. Now, if you haven't seen part 1, go and watch that first. The link will be above me, and I'll also put it in the comments down below. So go watch that first and then come back and watch part 2. Also, leave me a comment below and let me know if you have ever had a UFO encounter or if you know anyone else who has. So let's get into part 2 of this story. Now, as you remember in part 1, I told you guys that I am a walk-in. And just briefly, as a reminder, a walk-in situation works like this. Normally, a human body goes through one entire lifetime with one person occupying that body. In a walk-in situation, a person is born and they live out their life to the point that they had planned to be here, and then they depart. However, the body does not perish. And instead of the body itself perishing, as in physical death, a second being comes in to live out the remainder of that lifetime with a completely different purpose in mind. Usually that purpose is one of service to humanity. So in my case, I am the second person that has occupied this physical medium in its continuum of a lifetime. So I wanted to bring that up again as a reminder because if you remember in part 1, the story begins with the person that was here prior to myself who experienced that UFO encounter. And as you may remember, her name was Karen. So let's pick up the story on the morning after she had that amazing UFO encounter and was taken on board that ship. Now, the next day was actually quite shocking for her because if you remember the message given from the extraterrestrials, the time is coming soon for you to shed your false identity and be who you really are. And this message, of course, was given to many, many people who were taken on board that particular ship. And that message was literally branded in her consciousness. It was so intense and so strong, but she didn't know what it meant. So for at least, I don't know, maybe a week or 2 weeks, something like that, every time she looked in the mirror, she had this very weird experience. She would look at her face in the mirror and she would feel like, that's not my face. That doesn't feel like that's me. Now, I think what she was actually experiencing, and I also believe, I want to add that I think the message, the time is coming soon to shed your false identity and be who you really are. Notice it was the time is coming soon. Now, when we're talking about an extraterrestrial reality, time is very different than our sense of time. So to us, somebody says the time is coming soon, we think that's like a couple hours or a few days. Well, this turned out to be years, okay? So I personally think that perhaps that message was referring to the mass spiritual awakening that is happening on our planet right now. Because think about this, as I've told you guys in other videos, the essence of a spiritual awakening is really a paradigm shift of recognizing that you are not your physical body, that you are an infinite being in the universe who occupies this body, but who you are is an empowered being of love and light. So if you take that understanding and apply it to what I said about her experience of looking in the mirror and saying, this doesn't feel like my real face. But see, she didn't have any context for that because there was so much of her memory she couldn't recall in terms of the communication that they were all given on board this ship. So if you can imagine going through something like that and you don't have anybody around you explaining to you what that means, that can be a little bit intense. Now, in addition to that experience, there was this very deep awareness that she was supposed to do something as a result of that experience. And she didn't know what it was. And the only thing she could come up with was things like, well, am I supposed to write a book? Am I supposed to lead a seminar? But then she would say to herself, but I don't know anything to talk about, because as you may remember, she was a fitness professional and this was completely out of her range of experience, this entire situation. So she started feeling compelled to take long walks, and I think that was like a physical reaction to searching for, what am I supposed to do? What does this mean? Where am I supposed to go? And there were just no answers. There was just that deep inner feeling that it was almost like a compulsion. If you guys ever saw or heard of the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if you've seen that movie, where the people that had the experience, the extraterrestrial encounter, started to feel like this compulsion to go to a certain place, but they didn't know where it was, they didn't know what it meant. It's very similar to that movie. That scene in that movie, which is a big part of the movie, actually reminds me a lot of what she experienced at that time. Now, over the next few months, huge changes started taking place in her consciousness. She had at least 2 or 3 highly unusual, I guess you'd classify them as metaphysical experiences or encounters, and the most striking of those involved several hours of missing time. So what happened in that experience was this. Something woke her up in the middle of the night. It was like around 1 o'clock in the morning, and she sat up in bed. She was wide awake, and she actually looked at the clock. And it was, I don't have a recollection in this brain of the exact time, but it was around 1 a.m. So she knew specifically what time it was. She knew she was wide awake because she was sitting up in bed. Well, the next memory that happened, this was really, really strange. The next memory that happened, she was laying at the foot of the bed, kind of curled up, like, if you were sleeping sort of on your side. She was kind of curled up with her eyes closed at the foot of the bed on top of the covers. And over top of her was this brilliant light, almost like this, I don't know, oval-shaped, radiant, beautiful light. And the energy from this light was so profound. There was just this incredible love. And the thing that was the most striking to her was the feeling of kindness and patience and love coming from this light. Now, she said to herself, that's the Almighty. She thought that was the word she literally used to herself. That's the Almighty. Now, it wasn't, but that's what it felt like, because the energy was so beautiful and so strong with that love. Now, there were a few moments there where she literally thought she was going to die. She thought she was going to go into this light and that was going to be the end of her life. It was going to be over. Well, that didn't happen. But there was some kind of a subconscious communication going back and forth between her and this light. And the only thing she was aware of was that it's very hard to explain, because we're used to having one experience or the other, right? Either conscious or not. But she was conscious, but at the same time, it was like this double awareness that something was being communicated, but her conscious mind couldn't grasp what it was. But at the same time, she knew something. And the communication was again related to whatever this thing was that she was supposed to do. But the thing that was so striking was she knew she hadn't figured it out yet, but the patience and the kindness and the love coming from this light, it was like incredible, unlimited patience and kindness. That's the best description, and that's the way she talked to herself about it, essentially. So then at some point the light disappeared and she sat up and went, and she was like, what? She was kind of like in an altered state, and she went back over to where she would have normally been sleeping in the bed and looked at the clock, and it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. And she had no idea where those missing hours were. It was like they just disappeared. Now, I personally think there's a very good chance that she was probably taken up on a ship again, because that's a fairly common situation when you have missing time and that sort of an experience that you are just taken elsewhere and you have no memory of what actually occurred. So I think that's probably what happened at that time. Now, within the next few months, there were at least 2 other encounters that were not quite as striking. One of them happened in the afternoon in broad daylight, and she was sitting on a sofa in their family room. This was the house she shared with her then boyfriend, and she became aware that there were several beings that she couldn't really see. It was almost like looking into another dimension, and she was aware that they were watching her. Again, there was this feeling that something was being communicated, but not on a conscious level. And I want to emphasize, none of these experiences had any fear associated with them. It was not scary, it was very peaceful, it felt very comfortable. So that's pretty cool, right? So now this is where the story begins to transition into where she begins to discover what is the actual next thing that she really is meant to do. Now, at the time, as I told you guys in the first video, she was a fitness professional, a trained ballet dancer. That was her whole life. That was her career. That's what she loved. So she was working at the time at this exclusive women's spa teaching exercise classes. And one of her coworkers, who was also a friend of hers, had been inviting her for like, I don't know, a year maybe, I'm not really sure, to come and attend these meetings about this meditation that her coworker friend was doing. Well, as you remember, Karen was like completely against anything metaphysical. She'd never been exposed to it. This was not a time when the New Age was so popular like it is now, and all this metaphysical stuff is popular. It just wasn't. And she had no exposure to it. So when her friend brought up meditation, it was like, no way, forget it. I don't want anything to do with that sort of thing. She was like, everything's physical to me and that's it, right? So it was always no, 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 no. Well, as her consciousness was transitioning during this period of several months, something happened at the end of those several encounters that I just described to you guys. And her friend once again invited her. They were sitting there at work in the lounge, and her friend said, you know, we're having this meeting tomorrow night. Are you sure you don't want to come to this? And Karen, all of a sudden, it was like something had changed in her. Something had shifted. And she's like, yeah, I think I do want to go to that. Now, I know that sounds like no big deal, because we all talk about meditation right now, right? But at the time, this was like a huge change for her. This was a big, big deal. So she went to this meeting, and you know, it all felt a little bit weird to her, but they were showing this like slideshow of this Indian guru who was the teacher of this meditation. And she looked at these pictures of this man, and she said, I think that's where I'm supposed to go, meaning what she was supposed to do next, the thing she'd been searching for about what to do, right? Yeah, it was like this weird revelation. I don't know how to describe it. It was almost like, you know, a person has a very specific personality their whole life. They think a certain way their whole life. So that's still there. But then there's this other track happening of all this massive influence from these experiences that have been happening to her, where her consciousness is literally being transformed. So she proceeded to get involved in this meditation, and she was heavily devoted to this. I mean, heavily involved, very devoted. She was meditating every morning, every night for an hour. She even traveled to different countries to hear this person speak, this guru. It was a profound experience. She did this for 6.5 years. Now, throughout that time, she was aware that this was still not the main thing. So this kept nagging at her more and more. Yeah, but what is it? What is the real thing I'm supposed to be doing? Because this was really all just about a preparation. And this entire involvement that she had with this particular meditation was beautifully preparing her for what was coming next. So at the end of that 6.5 year period, a series of cascading events began to take place, all of which in retrospect were beautifully orchestrated and synchronized. Now, by this time, she had decided to take up women's bodybuilding. She was really into weight training and all of that. Now, unfortunately, as a beginner in bodybuilding, she got some poor instruction from an instructor at the gym where she was working out. And she developed some very minor knee pain. So then she said, oh, well, this is no big deal. I'll just go to a doctor and find out what's going on. So she went to this well-known orthopedic sports medicine guy. And the weird thing is, he actually made it worse. By the time he was finished with his examination, she could hardly walk. She was in so much pain. So it went from minor to very serious. So then he said, no, go to my physical therapist. That'll fix it. She went to the physical therapist, got what, in my personal opinion, was, again, not very good advice. It got even worse. So by now, she was literally crippled. She had knee braces on. They were giving her drugs for pain. It was just a complete disaster. And she couldn't do her work anymore. She couldn't teach her fitness classes anymore. And seriously, guys, this was like really bizarre, okay? So anyway, she calls the doctor and says, this is really going downhill. This is really bad. I need a solution. So they said, oh, no problem. We can just do surgery. So she stopped and she said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. So she said to herself, and this is where the amazing thing started to unfold. She started thinking, and remember, it's a person who doesn't have any metaphysical knowledge of any kind. So the words that she used, this is what she said to herself. She said, you know what? I think I remember hearing one time about faith healers. That's what she called it, right? I think I need one of those faith healers, but I don't know where to find one. So then literally the next day, a good friend of hers called her up and she said, hey, I have this friend who's flying in from Texas to visit, and he does healings, and he needs a place to stay. And I was thinking, if he could stay at your house, he would do the healings on your knees for free, because see, now she and her friends all knew she had this problem, right? So how weird is that? She said, I think I need a faith healer. Then her friend calls and says, hey, this guy's flying in from Texas. Now, if someone had written a script, they couldn't have written a better script, because as you know, she was very almost paranoid about anything metaphysical, but yet she had already decided she needed this healing. Now, if it had been a healer that was what we would normally think of as a typically spiritual healer, she would have been like freaked out by that, right? This guy was like tailor-made for her. He was completely into football. He smoked cigarettes. He flew in and stayed at her house, and he was passionate about football. All he wanted to do was heal professional football players. That was like his thing in life. He didn't know why he had this gift. He had this gift where he could put his hands on someone and heal them. He had no idea what it meant. He had no idea why. He was just a regular guy who was totally into sports. Like, what could be more perfect, right? So this is going to sound hilarious, but this is what happened. So he did healings on her knees with his hands. He was staying at her house. He would watch football on TV while he's doing the healing. He would sit on the sofa. She would sit on the sofa and put her legs on his lap. Her knees would be on his lap. He would put his hands on her knees and do the healing while he's watching football. I kid you not. It was crazy. And she thought that was just the greatest thing ever, because this guy's like a regular person, right? He's not weird at all. That's really funny, isn't it? Now, the crazy thing is, it actually started to work. She experienced literally a 50% improvement in the condition of her knees. It was really quite dramatic. But here's the problem. He was going back to Texas, and the healing wasn't complete yet. So she was saying to herself, well, now what am I supposed to do? So then she said to herself, if he can heal me, maybe I could learn to heal myself. That's what I need. I need to learn how to heal myself. Once again, she had no idea how that was going to happen. So the beautifully orchestrated script continues to unfold. The very next day, the same friend calls her up and says, I have a friend coming up from Florida who's staying with me. She's a really good friend, and she wants to teach a workshop on self-healing. The only problem is she doesn't have any place to do it. And since you're not using your exercise studio, this is what she's saying to Karen, because Karen had, they had converted their whole basement into an exercise studio. And that was where she was currently teaching her classes. So she said, since you're not using your studio, we were thinking maybe she could teach her self-healing class there and you could do the class for free. And at the end of the class, she's going to be doing this channeling. So Karen was like, oh, wait, no channeling. No, 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 that's way over the line. I don't want to have anything to do with that. But she was in a real quandary, you see, because this was like the answer. I need to know how to do self-healing, but I can't handle this channeling thing. There's just no way. So her friend tried to reassure her, oh no, this lady's really nice. She's just a normal person. And Karen was like, well, I need to talk to her on the phone first because I really don't think I can deal with this channeling thing. She ended up getting on the phone with her from Miami and they had a brief conversation, and then Karen got off the phone. She's like, wow, she's just like a regular person. She's just like totally normal. So then Karen came up with a plan. She thought, okay, they had stairs that went down to a second room next to this exercise studio. And she figured out, she said, if I arrange the chairs so I'm sitting at the very back of the room, when the channeling thing starts, I can sneak out the back and run up the stairs and I don't have to be there for any of it. So the workshop took place, and as she had planned, she stayed in the back and was all ready to run up the stairs before the channeling. But just as and this woman was channeling an angel named Sylvia, and just as she was going to leave, she said, I'm just going to stay for a second and see what it's like, right? Well, it felt really good. And this being who was an angel, Karen said to herself, you know what? She just seems like so normal. This is what she kept saying to herself. Everything seems so normal, right? This is really funny. So she ended up, she was kind of going out the door and was like, no, I think I'm going to stay a little bit longer. She ended up staying for the whole thing. Well, after that, she and Diane, who was the woman who was doing the channeling, they became pretty good friends. And Karen went to her for private channeling. She was really gotten comfortable with it now. She was really enjoying it. And then one day, Diane said to her, she said, you know, I have this funny feeling I should teach you how to channel. You see how this is amping up over time? So, of course, same reaction as before. No way, absolutely not. I would never ever consider such a thing. There is no way, absolutely not. No, the door is closed. Now here's what happened. This is what I mean by synchronicity and beautiful orchestration. Like someone wrote a script. People kept saying things that just clicked and opened her up. So what does Diane say to her? She said, okay, well, you know what? Maybe you could just learn to channel energy, and that might be good for your work with fitness and things, just to know how to channel energy in your body. I mean, that's like crazy, right? That's crazy. But Karen said, oh, that sounds like a really cool idea. Yeah, I think I'd like to learn that. Here we go again. Perfectly scripted words. Who's scripting all of this, guys, right? There are bigger forces in this universe than we are being told, okay? So they scheduled an entire day together where she would learn how to channel. Now the thing is, to channel safely, you need to have what is called a gatekeeper. So she had to learn, okay, well, I gotta channel this angelic presence because I need the gatekeeper. So one thing led to another, and it all felt very natural to her. And that's what's shocking to her. I have to tell you, to Karen's experience, it was absolutely shocking that it felt so incredibly natural, because she thought this is going to be like really weird, right? And it just felt natural. And she kept saying to herself, and then she said, even to Diane, she said, I think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This just feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. So from there, she started to get very serious training from Diane. She got serious training from a mentor in New York City, someone else in Florida. So we're talking about a lot of extensive training from people who were reputable, who'd been around for a long time. And I'm telling you this because this is going to lead to my story later on. Now, meanwhile, her entire fitness career basically collapsed. And her life completely transitioned to where she was working now as a channeling spirit guides for people. And she was also actually doing some healings herself by appointment on people who were coming to her for that purpose. Now, I want you guys to think about how utterly amazing this story is. And we're not finished yet. I'm actually maybe going to have to do a part 3, where you're starting with a person who has not only isn't interested in such things, but is adamantly against it. And miraculous things unfold, all of them imbued with this incredible love and kindness and patience and just this amazing loving energy, completely transforming this person's consciousness. And I also want to add, just so you're very clear as I tell you this story, that as all of these things were unfolding in her life, she was feeling better, she was feeling happier, she was feeling more at peace. So this was not a story of somebody's life going downhill. This was actually a story of somebody's life being lifted up higher and higher to something far more purposeful than what she had been living all along. There was an entire year of very intensive work channeling spirit guides, and during this time her life had become a true adventure. I call them interdimensional senses, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all of that stuff was opening up. She was coming to a point where she was easily clairaudient, meaning that you can hear interdimensionally, you can receive messages. There was so much learning that was taking place, an intensive amount of learning and balancing and centering and figuring out how to live in this completely new reality in a balanced way, which was happening. It was just, it was very beautifully guided, but it was also a lot. But it was really, the experience for her was just like this amazing adventure. So then she was able to start seeing her angels. She was able to start seeing spirit guides. She was communicating. I mean, do you guys realize how incredible this is from somebody who was like completely shut down to all of this happening? It's utterly amazing. Now, this is where she's getting to the point where she's really completed her mission on this earth, and then it's my turn where I'm going to be coming in soon thereafter. And that's a whole other amazing story. So as things were coming to yet another transitional point, she was saying to herself, I don't think I'm going to be doing this work forever. I'm probably going to do it for maybe a year, maybe that's all. But there was no sense of anything at all beyond that. And that's where we start to have an overlap starting to happen in this story. A whole other storyline begins to unfold in parallel to the one I've been telling you guys about. So I'm going to do another video. It's going to be part 3, and don't miss part 3, you guys. And here's why. Because in part 3, I'm going to describe to you exactly what happened when she left. And this is going to be very interesting, because normally we always hear about people in their near-death experiences, right? Because they come back, right? And they tell us what happened. Well, I'm going to be able to tell you guys something about what happens when you don't come back. What happens just prior to departing this planet as in death. I say as in death because in this case the physical body doesn't die, but the being leaves exactly in the same way as when the physical body does die. So I'm going to be able to tell you something that those who have near-death experiences cannot tell you because they come back. I'm going to share that with you guys in part 3. So stay tuned for that. So I hope you've enjoyed part 2 of this amazing story. A big part of the reason I'm sharing this with you guys is I want you to understand why I'm always talking about having a universal context and an extraterrestrial context, and why we need that bigger context, because there is so much going on in this universe that's affecting our planet and affecting us as human beings on this earth. So hopefully this story is inspiring to you. Hopefully it opens your heart and opens your mind to know that there are benevolent forces at work on our planet who are assisting us in our ascension, in our spiritual awakening, and there are just some amazing things going on throughout this cosmos. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with any friends who you think would find this topic interesting, and remember to leave me a comment and let me know if you have ever had a UFO encounter of any kind, or if you know anyone who has. I would love to know. So please subscribe to my channel and be sure to hit the notification bell so that you get notified, especially when I post part 3 of this story, because you don't want to miss that. That's really amazing. And with that, I'm sending you so much love, light, loads of positive energy. Have a beautiful day. Namaste.